Welcome everybody to our webinar today on taking care of your soul at seminary. My name is Daniel Montanez. I work in the admissions office here at Gordon Conwell, and we're really excited to be hosting this webinar for you today, just so that you can learn what is it like to be at seminary, truly taking care of yourself, not only academically, but also spiritually. So the purpose of this webinar is to listen to two of our professors and faculty who really are trained within this topic and address this conversation of taking care of your soul intentionally. This is the work that they do here at the seminary, and we're really excited for them to have them join us today. I will briefly introduce them. We have Dr. Mateus de Campos here, who is the director of the discipleship experience. He's also professor of New Testament here. And then we have Dr. Steve Macchia, who is the director of the Pierce Center. So we are very excited to have them here today, joining us, speaking to us on this topic. And before we get started, I'll just go over a few of the logistics so you know how this call will be. So the first 20 minutes of this call will be us hearing from them on taking care of your soul at seminary, particularly those two initiatives in which I spoke about, the discipleship experience and the Pierce Center. After that, we will open it up for a short time of guided questions, and then you will have the opportunity to ask questions to them as well here on this call. So we hope to finish the call around 12:45. Just a few quick reminders. If you could please keep yourself muted throughout the call, that'd be great. This call is also being recorded. So if you'd like to turn on your cameras, we'd love to see your beautiful faces. However, if you've preferred not to, that's absolutely fine as well, because this will be posted online. And finally, we have a feature. When you ask questions, we'll ask you to make sure you raise your hand with the Zoom feature. So if we could all do a quick little practice session. If you click on the participants at the bottom of your Zoom call, there should be a button there that says to raise hand. So if you could just click that button just as a quick practice, then we'll know that we're all here. Or we can do that. So when it's the time for Q&A, we can all do that. With that, I think we'll be good to go to go ahead and begin in this webinar. I'll go ahead and ask Dr. Let's see who we have first up here, Dr. Macchia, if you could open us up and speak about the Pierce Center and what does it mean to take care of your soul at seminary.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you all for taking some time to join us on this call today. And for those who are listening after it's been recorded, we are here to welcome you on behalf of Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary. And we trust that as you are discerning the way forward, that you come and be a part of our community. We look forward to getting to know you. I look at seminary as a three-legged stool. One leg of the stool is your academic pursuits, all the coursework that you take and the academics that are provided for you, which are foundational to a good, solid seminary education. The second leg of the stool is what I describe as skill development or mentored ministry. And all of you will be asked to participate in some sort of mentored ministry experience where your skills as a pastor, a teacher, a counselor, a missionary, theologian, any of these opportunities for you to test your skills and be trained in your skill development. That's really, really important. And the third leg of the stool is what we would describe as soul care, taking care of the inner life, your spiritual practices, your walk with God. And interestingly, at most seminaries, including Gordon-Conwell, the first two are required and the third is optional. So you're required to take your academics, you're required to develop your skills, but we treat you as adult learners and adult believers as well. So we say, come and join our community, but make sure that you choose to take care of your soul. We don't want to harp on you. We don't want to produce a guilt in you. We don't want you to feel like it's a should-do experience. We want you instead to make sure that you remember that everything related to the care and nurture of your soul is an invitation to God, from God to you, because he loves you and he wants to have an intimate fellowship and relationship with you. So we're just reminding you, Mateus and his program and our program, the Pierce Center, we're here to just remind you, don't neglect your soul, because it's the essence of you. It's the deepest part of you. It's the place where God and God alone seeks to reside. And we don't want to crowd him out of our soul because we are too busy academically or too busy in productivity and daily life and getting our skills developed, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is encouraging you to take care of that foundational, most important relationship, and that is your affection for God, your love for God, because he has an intimate, infinite, expressive love for you. He's initiating toward you all the time, and he wants you to pay attention to him and his loving initiatives. So when you come to seminary, Gordon Conwell in particular, we're going to encourage you to take care of your soul, because the lover of your soul is inviting you to do so. I like in John 15 the great abide passage. Abide in me as I abide in the Father. I invite you to abide in me and remain in my love. That's the phrase, invitationally, remain in my love, and love one another, and go and bear fruit. So it's develop your affection for God, create that affection for one another as friends of God, and that's where you'll bear great fruit as a seminary student, but also in future life and ministry. It'll be what sustains you for the long haul. So the Pierce Center is here to help you prioritize the care of your soul while you're at seminary. We have what we would call Pierce Fellows that are your fellow students who are participating more intensely with us at the Pierce Center. And then they lead what we call soul care groups, which are scattered all throughout the campus community. So you'll be invited to join a soul care group with people that you live with or do class and do life with, and because we want you to develop your friendship with one another. So it's friendship with God in your prayer closet, and it's friendship with one another in the soul care experience or the soul care groups that we'll encourage you to be a part of. And then we want you to practice things like Sabbath, that you take good care of resting in the midst of the fullness of your seminary life here at Gordon Conwell. And it will be a full life. It'll be a full experience and hopefully a well-balanced, or maybe even a living tension between all of these demands that are upon you. So yeah, take care of your soul. Make sure you have a prayer closet experience. Make sure you're a part of a soul care group with each other. We offer soul Sabbaths where you can practice a day of silence and solitude and more of a listening approach to God, where you're in the scriptures, but you're receiving his love through the scriptures and letting them minister to you, practicing your prayer life and just a preference for God in every aspect of your daily life and your seminary experience. So I guess if I were to leave you with one big word, it's the word friendship. Friendship with God and friendship with one another. And doing seminary together is a far better way than feeling like you're feeling isolated or doing it on your own. So you're in seminary with God, and you're in seminary with the people of God. So make the best use of that, and we'll be here to cheer you on and encourage you and resource you. And so I'm delighted to welcome you and look forward to seeing you a part of our community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Macchia. And if I might just say, when I was a student at Gordon Conwell, I was also part of a soul care group. And that experience was foundational for me and just my own spiritual development. Having those group of people who could take what I was that would not only tend to what I'm learning in the classroom, but also what's happening in my soul during that experience. It was crucial and foundational for my experience. I'm still in contact with the people of my soul care group today after graduating from seminary. So it's a foundational experience, something that is unique to Gordon Conwell that I believe everyone would benefit from.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. And now we'll go ahead and pass it on to Dr. de Campos, who will speak to us about a little bit about caring for your soul at seminary, and particularly the discipleship experience.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll go ahead and claim this virtual space as Gordon Conwell property and say, welcome to Gordon Conwell. I wish I could be in a room with you guys, but this is the next best thing, I guess. I'd like to talk about the discipleship experience, but I would like to frame that in the context of a personal experience I had. I always like to start with stories. It's something that stories are things that fascinate me, and I think it's a good framework to understand a lot of things in the Christian life. So I'd like to begin with this personal experience I had a few years ago during my PhD studies. Just to give you a bit of background, I served as a pastor in Brazil for 10 years before going to academia. And when I found myself in the University of Cambridge, it was a radical shift for me. On one hand, it was a dream come true. I was studying scriptures 8 hours a day, and that was my only responsibility. So it was I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. But on the other hand, I realized very quickly that I was engaged in a highly intellectual exercise, and that the environment itself, of course, Cambridge is no seminary. It's a lot more dry in terms of your experience. But I found that the environment was fostering the intellectual study of scriptures, but it was by no means an environment where I could develop myself as a Christian. So there was in this contradictory experience, learning a lot about God and His Word, but finding myself in this very draining environment and very dry experience when it comes to spiritual formation. That was ironic because my dissertation topic was resistance to Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. And I was spending my day studying the ways in which the religious authorities of Israel, and particularly the disciples of Jesus, had opposed Jesus in his mission, and especially when it comes to the disciples, opposing Jesus' discipleship focus. So I was led to study all sorts of connections between Mark and the Old Testament, seeing how scriptures constantly reflects on people's resistance to God and to His mission. And this was very thought-provoking and very stimulating for me as a student. I was very excited. But at the same time, something else was going on. Cambridge was one of the most difficult times for me and my family. Just to give you a sense of what was happening, on the day we moved to Cambridge, my daughter developed a bleeding disorder that followed her throughout her time in Cambridge. And even to this day, we still suffer with the aftermath of that. Also, for the first time, we had lived in other countries before, but for the first time, we were feeling socially ostracized and alienated. We were living in England in the middle of Brexit, and we were living in a predominantly British village. So we experienced a lot of the effects of xenophobia. My wife couldn't find any friends. My son was being bullied at school. And as a consequence, my wife and I began to struggle emotionally, even with periods of depression. It was very hard, very difficult time for us. And that's when I began to question God. Why did you bring me to this place? Are you in any way involved in my life? How can I be studying scriptures this whole time and feeling so disconnected? What are you doing, Lord? That was my question. And then one day I was walking on a path in the woods. I do that often. That's the way I process my thoughts and my relationship with God. I walk a lot. And I was just complaining and just grumbling about my situation with the Lord. And I should say at this point that my research dealt a lot with the term "the way," both in the Old Testament and Mark. The way was the place where God tested Israel. The way was the place where Jesus taught his disciples, and also the way where people fail the most in relation to God. And here I was, on the way, in a way, on the way, on the woods, in the woods. And that's when suddenly I felt God speaking to me very deeply. I realized that everything I was studying were not simply the attitudes of Israel or the attitudes of the disciples of Jesus, but they were very, very clearly expressions of failure that I was observing in my own life. And on that day, my research came alive to me. My studies became part of my life with God. This was not simply about an intellectual exercise. It was not simply about getting a degree. This was about my life and my relationship with the Lord. And as cliche as it sounds, that genuinely changed my life, my perception of my relationship with God. There's a few things that I learned with that experience that I think applies to discipleship. First, studying things that are related to God does not necessarily mean that you are engaged in a meaningful relationship with God. Right? Studying things that are related to God does not necessarily mean that you are engaged in a meaningful relationship with God. You need to intentionally seek to deepen your relationship with God and to integrate what you learn about God with your life with God. That's intentionality. You probably have heard that a lot of people lose their faith in seminary. That's a common, I think, flawed narrative that people hear. And while it's true that some people grow cold in seminary, that's not because seminary itself is a problem, although seminaries, in my view, are responsible for developing strategies to integrate spiritual formation with ministry, as Dr. Macchia was talking about. But a lot of the process depends on the intentionality of the student. You have to be intentional about seeking spiritual friendships, to seek mentoring relationships, to develop healthy habits, to balance your life, to take care of your family, for those of you who are married or have kids. Without these things that give structure to your experience in seminary, your A in academics will become an F in life in ministry. You have to be intentional about developing those elements that will ground your experience, your intellectual experience, with your actual life and with your future ministry. Second thing that I learned is that discipleship is an ongoing journey. Discipleship is an essential framework for your journey with Christ. There's this old perception that discipleship is sort of an initial stage where we teach the essentials of Christian doctrines to new believers. And then these new believers, after a season of discipleship, they become mature Christians, and then they go to seminary and become pastors, right? That's not what discipleship is. Discipleship is not a stage of life, of Christian life. Discipleship is the Christian life. It's a paradigm of relationship with Christ. It's an ongoing walk with Christ that will lead you to different places and different moments in your experience, and will lead you to grow in Christ. You never graduate from discipleship to become a mature Christian. Actually, a mature Christian is someone who realizes he's always a disciple. He never ceases to be a disciple. So seminary, in that sense, is a great opportunity to integrate deep learning about God with an intentional walk with Christ. The third thing that I learned is that discipleship is a community endeavor. It's not for nothing that Jesus called 12 to be with him. Discipleship is a journey in which we walk together following Christ. By the way, that's the motto of the discipleship experience, walking together following Christ. So with all that in view, the discipleship experience, which we call it a program for lack of a better word, but it's only a program insofar as it provides structure for something that should be a very dynamic process in your own life. And it's designed as an opportunity for you as a student to develop discipleship as a value for life and as a value for ministry. We are concerned with your experience at Gordon-Conwell, but we're also concerned with the fact that discipleship has to be a very integrated in the way you do ministry afterwards. Right? It's scary to see the statistics that only, I think, 5% of churches in America actually engage in meaningful life-on-life discipleship as part of ministry. And that is scary, given the fact that discipleship is the essential model that Christ himself prescribed for us. So the discipleship experience tries to tie those two things, your experience as a student and your future experience as someone who will be engaged in some sort of leadership role for the people of God. It's a 2-year program. The first year, students are paired with a discipler. 70% of our team is made up of faculty members this coming year, and 25% local pastors and alumni of Gordon-Conwell. They meet regularly throughout the academic year, most of the time in cohorts of 3 students plus the discipler. They read specific sections of scriptures together, asking the question, what does it mean to be a follower of Christ in this specific moment in my life? There are also some events that are designed to foster a deeper reflection on discipleship. And then in the second year, students will find a church where they will find people with whom they can develop this discipleship relationship, while also keeping in touch regularly with their initial cohort. So the idea is for you to constantly have someone speaking into your life and to speak into someone else's life and create a dynamic process of discipleship. It's a scholarship program with some financial support for students involved in the program, as is the priest fellowship as well. And there's a lot more I could say about the program itself, but I'll let you ask questions if you have them. And we'll also be launching the new website with all the details of the program in the next 10 days or so. So thank you for the opportunity of sharing this with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. De Campos. A big thanks to both of our panelists for speaking to us on how to take care of your soul during seminary. I think what both of you have shown is just the value that we place on spiritual formation and on spiritual growth and discipleship as part of the seminary experience, as central to the part of seminary experience. So we thank you for that. We're going to open up for questions in the next few moments. So if you could please begin to write down your questions. I'll go ahead and start us with one just to get us kicked off. And then we'll go ahead and open it up to those here in the group. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you so you could share the question. So Dr. De Campos, you spoke on this a little bit, but I wanted to pose it again to have Dr. Macchia the opportunity to respond as well. But one of the common concerns about coming to seminary is that many times it's called a cemetery. And that many times people are afraid, people are discouraged to go to seminary because they believe it is a place for you to go where you will grow intellectually, but you will suffer spiritually. And to the both of you, or just Dr. Macchia, if you'd like to respond again, Dr. Campos, you're more than welcome to, but how would you respond to that common concern, maybe to someone who is facing that initial fear of coming into a seminary context and facing those challenges?
Is that for me? Yeah, we've heard that. I don't think it's very funny, but I do think people make it a joke. And part of it is there's a reality to it, that in many circumstances, people have lost their faith or become cold-hearted or, resistant to the very fundamentals that brought them to seminary, an enthusiasm for God and a desire to grow in God and to learn about God. And in the academic pursuits, because they've so focused on feeding the mind, they have ignored the rest of themselves as individuals. It is rare, I would say, from our experience. I haven't seen a lot of that at Gordon-Conwell. So I think it's probably a statistic for the wider circle of seminaries. It's not in our seminary, of course, but that would be foolish too, because there have been experiences of our own students who have, their heart has grown cold. And as a result, when they're done, they may have their parchment to hang on the wall, but they have a hardened heart because things didn't end up the way they would have prescribed them to end up. So we have to be careful that we don't become self-prescriptive of what we expect of God in this season of our lives, and let God do his deep work in us. And if it's painful and if it's hard, to not walk away from God, but to walk toward our brokenness and our need for God. And if we have the safe environment of friendship and community and discipleship and mentors, people we can turn to, then really it shouldn't happen, because this is part of life, and we need to learn how to live our lives in the fullness thereof, which includes some hard knocks as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would add a few thoughts to that as well, Steve. I think this part of the problem is perhaps an understanding that Christianity is this fragile castle of cards, that once you start asking deeper questions, it will all come crumbling down. And if that is a perception of Christianity, it's a very, very weak perception of Christianity, actually. And I think what we try to do at Gordon Conwell is to give people the opportunity to ask the hard questions. But to understand that when you are engaging with those questions, it's not something you're doing apart from your spiritual life, as if intellect and spirit were some sort of two different compartments that are not integrated. Well, the Bible tells us to love God with all our mind. So that is to look at things in a more integrated manner, in which when you're engaging your studies, you're actually worshiping God with your mind. That's a fundamental understanding. And then to those who are spiritual, Paul says, everything is spiritual. Right? So you bring spirituality to your academics. You bring spirituality to your relationship with others. And when that becomes the framework, then you are open to a lot more things. Another thing is that people think that everybody in seminary are engaged in this, bookworms that's engaged in finding answers. Let me just tell you, there's a lot of space for mystery in theological studies. And we're not here just to give you formulas and ways to resolve all the theological conundrums. We're looking to theology and study of scriptures and other things to find ways to deepen your relationship and your understanding of your relationship with God. So there is no dichotomy, and you have to come to seminary with that worldview. I'm doing this with all my heart and with all my mind, and those two things are not apart.
Yeah, I think one other point is, if you come in to seminary and your real desire is to get the highest GPA possible, then you're going to be competitive with those who are potentially pursuing the same thing. And that competitive spirit can really get underneath your skin to the point where that contributes to your hard-heartedness that I spoke of earlier. Whereas if you come in with a desire to be a part of a community of learners, that together we're going to be learning and growing and sharing and helping each other and coming alongside each other, and not having that competitive spirit, you'll have a better chance of leaving seminary with a softened heart, a warm heart to God, and a warm heart to God's word and God's people. And I do see some of that competitive spirit showing its face on our campus. And I really try to help our students by saying, it's going to be very rare that anyone's going to be asking you for your transcript to see if you're going to be a good pastor or a good counselor or not. So if you're going to get so over-focused on the GPA, it may end up hurting you long term, not helping you. So coming in as a desire to be a disciple being discipled, being a learner and growing as part of this community, it'll be a great experience if you can let go of some of that competitive spirit that's within you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Macchia and Dr. de Campos. I think I can confidently say that between the discipleship experience, the partnership program, chapels that we have 2 times a week on campus, and many different student-led organizations, it would be very difficult, or you'd have to make a very intentional effort to not grow spiritually during your time at Gordon-Conwell. We try our very best to put that right at the forefront of your mind throughout the seminary experience. So thank you for sharing. At this time, we'll open it up to questions. If you have a question, you can go ahead and raise your hand. You could go like this, or you could use the Zoom one, and we'll go ahead and unmute you. Yes, Ellanor, let me, yes, go for it. Oh, I believe you're muted.
Am I unmuted? Can you? All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to be a distance learner. So how are you going to be able to accommodate my engagement as because of me being a distance learner?
May I ask, are you planning on coming on campus a few times a week, or what do you mean by distance learner exactly?
I reside in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
So I would be an online student. And
Okay.
so the opportunity to be a part of a learning community of people of those who are growing spiritually, I'm quite sure we need special consideration. So my question is, how can I feel connected as an online learner?
Are you attending classes in Charlotte or Hamilton? Are you basing in Hamilton?
Well, physically, I will be remaining in Charlotte, and all of my academic activities will be online.
Okay. The reason why I ask is because we have a Pierce Center director in Charlotte as well. So, and she does work with, her name is Sherry Adams, and she does work with students who are coming occasionally into the Charlotte campus, as well as being online in their coursework. So there would be a connection, a direct, or at least a possible direct connection with the Charlotte Pierce Center. We are in the Boston campus, the Hamilton campus, and the Charlotte campus. And since there's such a variety of ways in which students are completing their education, we provide a variety of ways in which some of the soul care offerings that we provide are available to online students. So that's why I asked if you're going to be connected at all with the Charlotte campus, I'd encourage you to try to meet Sherry Adams as quickly as possible.
I have visited the Charlotte campus. That was during the decision-making process in terms of identifying a theological educational program that I thought was suitable for me. But in terms of specific activities, now that I will have to follow up. So I'm familiar with members of the admissions team, but not the program team.
Okay.
So I would take responsibility and follow up and have a conversation with Sherry.
Yeah, she's wonderful. They do a variety of things in Charlotte through the Pierce Center, and it's different from Hamilton because Hamilton is more of a residential community experience, and Boston is completely different as well. So we adapt our program according to each of the campuses.
Okay.
Well, the discipleship experience is in its early stages, and we are, for the time being, we are focused in Hamilton, and mostly with residential students. But COVID-19 has taught us a lot, and I ended up finishing I was discipling 3 students last year. So we had the first semester, meeting together in my office, and I think half of the second semester was all via Zoom. It's not ideal, but it did work, and I think partly it worked because we had the prior personal connection.
Right.
But we are studying ways, especially as things are changing so rapidly. We are studying ways we can be more active in an online format as well.
Thank you. And Ellanor, I think one of the things that you will find is if while you're doing distance learning and you're taking classes online, potentially doing Zoom calls as well for Zoom classes as well, is that spiritual formation at Gordon Conwell is not limited to outside of the classroom, but you will also find it within the classroom as well. So one of the historic, and I believe this is still the case, requirements in order for someone to be a professor at the seminary is that you must have had pastoral experience. You must be function as a pastor in some type of capacity throughout your experience. And that's a very important perspective to bring into the classroom because there's a difference between somebody coming and teaching from a purely academic perspective versus someone who truly understands and knows who they're preparing for ministry and cares holistically for the person. So even within the classroom, our professors, they begin each class with the word of prayer. They end class with prayer. The way in which they teach, you can tell that they're teaching from their passion, they're teaching from their heart. It's not merely an intellectual exercise, but it's also deeply spiritually moving. There's been times where students just break down crying in the middle of the class because God is ministering to them there in that moment. So while not being on campus and being able to engage in the same way, you will definitely find that within the classroom as well. Thank you. Any other questions at this point? We probably have time for about one more. Yes, Cindy.
Hi, good morning. I'm from California, so it's still morning. Hi, so I have a question for both the panelists. I guess I'll go with Professor Macchia first. Like when it comes to soul care, like my question is like, what is it? I guess is my first question. And what do you do in a soul care group? And then to Professor de Campos, my question again is like, I would love to know some of the specifics on what's going on in a certain discipleship time when you have your cohort together. And is there a correlation between soul care and discipleship? So yeah, that's my question.
Who would like to go first? I'll start.
So yeah.
Okay. In a soul care group, we emphasize friendship, the word I started with. And what we mean by that is what we really, really want long term is for you to leave Gordon Conwell with some really deep friendships. Because we guarantee that 5-10 years later, you're going to need those friendships. And Daniel mentioned that he still is connected with his. I'm still connected with mine, and I won't tell you how many decades ago that was. But when I went through Gordon Conwell, I developed some very deep, deep friendships that are still in existence today. And it's because we met regularly to merely share life on life. So that's really the focus of soul care groups, is to come in, and the content of our time is the Word of God and each other's lives. So we want to open the Word, but we don't want to put more pressure on everybody because you have tons of expectations from your academic requirements. We don't want the soul care group to be another requirement in terms of another thing, like another Bible study to prepare for, another book to fill in the blanks of. So instead, it's very, much more casual, I guess, in terms of opening the scriptures, sitting with the scriptures, listening for God together in prayer, and then maybe asking a question or two of each other. And one of our most favorite questions is, how is it with your soul today? Which was a John Wesley question many, many years ago as he traversed the landscape. It was, how is it with your soul, dear friend? It's one of the best questions you can ask each other. So we encourage our folks to just basically sit with that question, let each other share how they're doing today. There's no right or wrong answer to it. And then by sharing life's story, I love that Dr. De Campos started with his story. We want to keep sharing the life story of the individual and come alongside each other prayerfully and lovingly. So the soul care groups, as we try to, we don't manage any of them. We try to equip them, try to excite people about them, and give a basic parameters of what we suggest you do with your time. But the long-term goal is deepening friendship, because we have loved each other enough to be honest with one another, and in being honest with one another, to be prayerful and to keep pointing people back to God, to trust Him, to remain in Him, to remain focused on Him. So that's what we do in a soul care group. And thankfully, there are hundreds of our students on the Hamilton campus alone that are engaged in one of these soul care groups. They're as small as 3 and as large as 8 people. And most of them meet weekly or bi-weekly. They just really want to stay connected. And even if you're a commuter student, we encourage students when they're on campus, still find each other. And we also say, don't look for people that are like the most difficult personalities on campus and feel like you have to go be with them. We say, no, you go find a friend, be with your friends. This is where we legitimize, the choices that people make in developing meaningful friendships, because the desire is the long-term connection. That's really the vision to keep in mind. 10 years from now, when I graduate seminary, who am I going to be calling to say, my senior pastor is driving me crazy, what do I do next? And if we don't have that, most of the casualties in ministry occur because people have been alone and not had those friendships, not had those connections. And they don't know what to do. So, the percentages of people leaving ministry are because of that very thing. They get discouraged, they're alone or lonely. And we don't want that. We don't want our seminary to be filled with lonely people. We want it to be filled with friends and friendship. I hope that helps.
Well, as for the discipleship experience, our goal is to help students to acquire a framework for discipleship, both for their own personal lives and for ministry afterwards. So it has this idea of being of continuing into discipleship even after you leave seminary. In a typical meeting, it's hard to talk about a typical meeting because we have so many different people involved, and disciplers are very free to add their own kind of signature to it. And we encourage actually our disciplers to approach things according to their own worldview and their own lenses. And that way students can connect with different people according to their different interests as well. But typically we'll have a time of reading scriptures together. We usually focus on the Gospels and the narratives of discipleship in the Gospels. And then we basically ask the question, what does it mean? What does this text tell me about being a disciple of Jesus? And how is it related to my own circumstances in life right now? How is Jesus challenging me as a disciple right now according to this text? And we encourage vulnerability on the part of the students. We usually have groups of 4, including the discipler. And this is a wonderful opportunity for the student to engage with faculty and sometimes pastors, but outside the classroom without the pressures of papers and academics and all that. And I can say, and as Steve was talking about friendship, we can really corroborate that how important it is. I became friends with my 3 friends this past year. They nurtured relationships very, very meaningful among themselves. They call one another when they have problems. And then the second year, you get to engage in discipleship in a local church. And that's the goal is for that to become a mode of ministry for you. We want future pastors and ministers and leaders to come out of seminary not with the impression that all they have to do is prepare a good sermon and preach, or to lead good committee meetings or things like that. That we want them to really be attentive to developing relationships that will help people to find their identity as disciples of Jesus Christ. So that's the orientation of our program.
Thank you so much, Dr. De Campos and Dr. Macchia. I believe that's all the time that we have for today. Let's go ahead and give our panelists a silent round of applause, since all you guys are on mute. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on this call. We hope that it was a blessing to you. We hope that you feel just a little bit more prepared as you engage on this path to either considering seminary or coming into seminary in the fall. We want you to know that we're here for you every step of the way, and that when you come to seminary, you will have a strong support network that's not only caring for you intellectually, but also emotionally and spiritually. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask Katie, who actually works in the admissions with us, if she could close us in a word of prayer.
I'd be happy to. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this time to be together, to consider what it looks like to care for our souls. I pray for those students who are planning to come to Gordon-Conwell that their time at seminary would not be spiritually dry, but that they would feel your presence and know that you are with them. And God, I pray for those who are still discerning their next steps, that they would hear your guidance and know what your plans are for them. I thank you for Dr. Macchia and Dr. De Campos and for their leadership, and just pray that as they continue to model discipleship and spiritual formation for our community, that they would find rest for their souls as well. We thank you again and just pray for everyone on this call as they go about their weeks, and it's in your name we pray.
Amen. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day.
God bless you.